10 Evolutionary Groups, How Humans Evolve as Understood by Alice Bailey. Group 8, Pledged Disciples, 6 questions. So here are the 6 questions, and they are taken from Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 2, pages 98 to 101. And if you haven't seen what a Pledged Disciple is, please look for that video, Pledged Disciple Introduction. So the first question, in summary, has to do with knowing your ray makeup. Then we have being able to truly discern your spiritual status, seeing what your next spiritual step is, what is your relationship with the group that you are serving with, what is your connection to a spiritual teacher who is leading you on the path, and are you clear about your service activity, and are you effectively implementing it? So let's break down and read the quotes about these 6 questions that we must answer. There's more than one question for each category, and I've given the categories their names just to let you know. So let's look at the first category of questions, knowing your ray makeup. Now this idea of ray makeup comes from the Alice Bailey books, where she talks about 7 rays, and they're named here: will or power, love, wisdom, active intelligence, harmony through conflict, concrete mind, sometimes it's also called science, idealism or devotion, and divine law and order, or ceremony and order they have here. Some people aren't using the exact names in their renditions here, and this is the kinds of personalities, according to this particular person, where I got this graphic from, you would find with will or power, a world leader, a politician, wise teacher under love, wisdom, a business manager perhaps. There's more things that they would do. Artist, composer, could also be somebody who is trying to bridge differences, a diplomat, etc. Scientist, researcher, mystic, humanitarian. This could also be somebody who is a religious leader in the kind of where we're devoted to a particular ideal, and a ritualist or a choreographer, or somebody you could say that's putting on the Olympics, trying to choreograph that whole thing. So this is not a video on the 7 rays and what they are. That's not the point here, but what I would like to say is that the idea of the 7 rays comes from the notion that when you use a glass prism and put white light into it, it splits into, in general, 7 different categories, and that's where like the ray types come from. Here is the lights that come from a prism, but you could also say that we have 7 days in the week. We have 7 primary notes on a musical scale. This idea of 7 in the Bible, the Christian Bible, the Torah, 7 days to create the earth. This idea of 7 as a sacred number is also existing within the Bailey system. Now there are 2 books, Esoteric Psychology 1, Esoteric Psychology 2, especially Volume 1, deals with what these 7 rays are. Those books are very extensive. We don't need to know all that. The point is, do you, question 1, this is a quote, from a study of the instructions given by me of your 5 conditioning rays, and from a study of yourself in connection with the information given, the quote continues, A, which of your 5 conditioning rays controls you, or which is most dominant? B, which ray should control you, and how can you strengthen that control? The answering of this question will require a truthful consideration of your good and bad qualities, of your assets, as well as your limitations. So, there are many type systems out now. When these books were written, between the 1910s to the 1940s, and the rays were well established in the 1930s with her books, there were not the type systems that exist now. Now, Alice Bailey knew of Carl Jung. Carl Jung knew of Alice Bailey. Carl Jung later developed his personality types. I read that book when I was a teenager, actually. That was borrowed from the astrological 12 signs. That's where Carl Jung got that idea from. Later that evolved into the Myers-Briggs. Later we also have the Enneagram that was developed out of an archetype of the Enneagram with its 9 different types, but the popular version of the Enneagram came about more in the 70s, 80s, etc. But those came after Bailey's idea of the 7 rays. Now, let's go to the next slide, because what makes it really interesting is how these ray types are used. So in most type systems, you get a type. In this system, you get a combination of types based upon the many different levels of the Bailey model. So everybody has a monadic ray type, and here we see that there are 7 levels in the Bailey system, and the level of the monad is reflected into what's called the spiritual triad, which is this triangle here of Atma, Buddhi, and Manas here. And that is also known as the true self. Then everybody has a soul ray and a personality ray. And if you notice, the personality is comprised of, below this dotted line, all these different planes and subplanes. There are 7 subplanes on each of these 7 planes. So it's these 18 subplanes comprises the personality and its ray type. Then you have a mental ray type, which comes from the plane of the lower mind, because the soul ray comes from the plane of the solar angel. Then you have the emotional ray type that comes from the emotional plane, and the physical ray type that comes from the physical plane. And the personality is comprised of one's mental, emotional, and physical rays that combine along with the personality. And then at some point, you start to express and unfold your other ray types more fully. So everybody has all of these rays within them, but they're not expressing fully. Why? Because most of humanity is only living within the middle of the emotional plane. And the cutting edge of humanity is just developing what we consider true mind on the plane of the lower mind. Now, go watch my video on the 6 types of mind that are talked about in the Alice Bailey system. And these 6 types of mind were presented long before Piaget started to explain his different types of mind. And I have videos on that on the Soul to Spirit channel that will clarify the different 3 types of mind that exist on the emotional plane and the different types of mind that exist on the sum total of the mental plane. So go watch that video if you want more understanding of that. But the point is, in her model, everybody has a monadic ray, a soul ray, a personality ray, mental ray, emotional ray, a physical ray, but we are not expressing them, unfolding them. For most of humanity, they are latent. But for those on the spiritual path, they are integrating the personality, so they are more fully expressing their personality, mental and emotional and physical rays, and they are learning to access their soul ray. We've been seeing that in that those on the probationary path are primarily on the plane of the lower mind. Well, they are on the plane of the lower mind, I should say, where those who are becoming group 8 accepting disciples are at the top of the plane of the lower mind, and pledged disciples are bridging from the plane of the lower mind to the plane of the solar angel. So those in group 8 accepting disciples, somewhat pledged disciple, and group 7 probationary disciples are expressing the personality ray, the mental, the emotional, the physical rays, and are learning to understand what their soul ray is, and are learning how to have their soul ray infuse and work with harmoniously these other ray types. So there are people that do 7 ray seminars. I recommend Eva Smith. If you want to find out who she is, you can put a commentary note, and maybe I'll put it where you can reach her down there. I have to ask her for permission, and I'm not doing that at the time I'm doing this video. So to let you know, these are the most common ray types for most of humanity. And you can look at those and see what those are. Remember, there are 7 rays, but not everybody has typically on the mental plane, a 2, a 3, a 6, or a 7th ray mind. Now, you can read Michael Robbins' books, Tapestry of the Gods, volumes 1 and 2, if you want to learn about the rays and find out more about that here. I'm just giving you an overview here. And then what you are meant to do, what the first question is about, is you're meant to understand what is your ray chart. Most of us will have a very difficult time discerning what our monadic ray is because most people on the path are just integrating their personalities and learning what their soul is. So most people will have this understanding, and here's a sample ray chart. You would have a 2nd ray soul, so love, wisdom would influence your soul. A 5th ray personality, which is more of a scientific bent. A mind that is more ray 4, harmony through conflict, or artistic. A 6th ray, more passionate, idealistic, emotional body. And a 7th ray physical, a physical body that is well ordered, well structured, easy to master, diet. They make great ballet dancers, etc. So you can see how analyzing a ray chart gets very complex because you've got a scientific bent with a love soul, with an artistic mind, with a passionate emotions. You can already understand why there's complexity in here. And the point is not to do a 7-ray seminar here. Is to understand that the first question for pledged disciples is they need to understand this in the Bailey model. Why? Because it's telling you what your service activity is. It's telling you what your dharma is. It's telling you what your good qualities are likely to be, what your bad qualities that you've got to work on are likely to be. And a pledged disciple has already pledged, is in the process of every day working on better understanding this, better refining it, and getting it to the point where the soul ray is what is dominant, and they're getting some hint of what the monadic ray may be as well. So I encourage you to go back through the video and look at these questions and take time with each question and see how well you do at answering them. The next question has to do with discerning your spiritual status. Now, I've given the headers to these 6 questions, but let's read the actual quote from the book. Question 2. Looking back over the years of instruction in your spiritual practice and life, and the instruction for those that were given to the pledged disciples in the Discipleship in the New Age books in the Bailey model, do you feel that you have definitely advanced upon the path? If so, upon what grounds do you base this belief? Could you have made more progress under the circumstances, and if you have not, what was the reason or reasons? Now, these questions were given specifically to the group that was pledged disciples in the Bailey books, but they can be general questions each and every one of us as a pledged disciple ask ourselves, because for this model to be authentic and true, it has to be true for everybody in their spiritual growth and development. It can't just be true for one group of people that studied the Alice Bailey books. That's not an authentic model. That's just some instructions for a certain group of people. But I do think that these questions can be authentically applied to all of us. We have to get keener and keener discernment and discrimination. Spiritual discernment and discrimination are applying to those in group 8. We must have viveka. Do we really know where we're at on a spiritual path? And how can we prove this? What are the grounds? What are the criteria? This has been my passion for my whole life, has been trying to articulate this model in a step-by-step way with laying out the clear a criterion for each and every stage that the Bailey books outline in this model, so that we can truly understand the model in a very clear way. This is my life quest, and hopefully the Soul to Spirit channel is helping you with that. And could we have made more progress under the circumstances? Remember, part of what we're doing as an accepting disciple and a pledged disciple is we're looking at our karma. And that is, who have we helped? Who have we hurt? It's not about knowledge in the way that a probationary, Group 7 probationary disciple is acquiring and accumulating knowledge. Metaphysical knowledge, philosophical knowledge, scientific knowledge, political knowledge. It's not about knowledge when we get to Group 8. It's about practicing spiritual values and principles. That's a different kind of knowledge here. And so, where are we at on the path? And I'm helping those that want to use the Alice Bailey model as an example get very specific criteria to look at where are we at? What progress have we made? What ways have we in our life, I've done this in my life too, say, oh my gosh, I wasted so much time doing this. I mean, everything goes towards the good in the end. Everything becomes a lesson. But you can look back and say, wow, I wasn't really using my time wisely back then. Can I use my time more wisely now? Now that I'm more clear about what the steps are, what's my next step ahead in terms of my spiritual status and the work I need to do? That's what these videos I'm hoping are helping you with. So speaking of seeing your next spiritual step ahead, that relates to question 3. Quote, in what do you personally feel that your work in the future should consist in the following 3 relations? A, with your personality and its particular circumstances and environment, so as to make your daily life more spiritually effective. B, in order to establish a closer contact with your soul with the same objective of effective spiritual living. And C, in order to bring about soul and personality at one-ment and clearly demonstrate the fact. What do you regard as the present greatest hindrance to this accomplishment? So you can take time and answer these questions for yourself, kind of pause the video and reflect on each one if you like. But you need to know your personality is the tendency to focus on yourself, your own needs, your own goals, your own group, your own spiritual group, your own, if you're a teacher of a spiritual group or the head of something, your own status as the head. This is all personality stuff. And we saw that over all the personality rules, the 18 subplanes, which means it's going to take you through groups 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and the beginning of group 8 is still personality focused primarily. When you get to be a pledged disciple, group 8 pledged disciple, is the only time we're really starting to work on the soul. So with the personality, it's circumstances, environment, your life. How can you make your daily life more spiritually effective? What are you doing in terms of the physical body, in terms of how you're handling your emotions, especially your emotions in regard to other people? Because group 8 is a lot about emotional cleanup here and how we're reacting to other people. That's what the Yoga Sutra training is about, the Bhagavad Gita training is about, that is recommended by Alice Bailey. She even wrote a commentary in the Yoga Sutras, A Light in the Soul. These are foundational texts for group 8 work that we need to get knowledgeable about because they help us master the mind in such a way we can create equanimity in the emotions. That's an essential word for both those texts, equanimity, so that we can establish closer contact with our soul. What are those soul values, qualities? There's a great book called Soul Compilation, which has a number of ideas from the Alice Bailey Lucis Trust, ideas of how do we act as a soul? What are those qualities, if you want to look at a compilation there? And in order to bring about soul and personality at one mint, it helps to know the ray of the soul, the ray of the personality, the mind, the emotions, the physical body, and to know what are the hindrances there in your ray makeup. What are the ways that your personality and its identification with its specialness, which we all tend to do unless we're really advanced on the path, so no shame in that. We're just all growing and learning. But what is our personality specialness doing that's standing in the way of greater soul infusion? Those are some great questions to ask ourselves. Sit down and actually answer them if you can, because this isn't just about intellectual learning. That's more 4, 5, 6, 7 probationary disciples, those groups, just acquiring knowledge. This is about applying it so it becomes wisdom. Question 4 for pledged disciples. Quote, are you satisfied with the relationship you have established with your group brothers? And I put in and sisters. This was written at a time when everybody only used the male pronoun in the 1910s to 1940s. But I put in and sisters to let you know. A, do you know them better and love them more than you earlier did? This means all of them as a group. B, along what lines do you feel that you have failed them? If you have, and what do you propose to do to rectify the situation? C, in what way do you feel that you have been an asset to the group? These 4 questions, the first 3 in the previous slides and this one that I've just given, I put in brackets just given, back to the quote, these 4 questions concern largely your ability to live as a soul in your little outer world and have reference primarily to your objective expression. The next 2 questions concern your subjective relationships. So the 4 questions we've just gone over help the pledged disciple be effective in group work. Watch that previous video on the pledged disciple. Remember, it's not just about how much you know and how much you can show everybody how much you know. Hey, super guilty of that one in my life. It's about, as we advance, how much you love, intelligently love those that you are serving with. Now, I do think that these questions apply to any group. I look at a group of scientists who know nothing about the Alice Bailey teachings, and they often are better at being pledged disciples than those who were in esoteric groups. And even in the Bailey group of pledged disciples, they were disbanded because they couldn't accomplish these things. Do we know the group that we're serving with to demonstrate some service activity in the world effectively, either in politics, either in education? Alice Bailey gave 10 different service groups. In psychology was one, science is one, art and culture is one. So there were 10 different seed groups that she had of ways that we could serve in the world here. And she was based on your ray type and what your service activity is, encouraging people that you can only be effective if you have a group. And question, in your group that you're either leading or attracted to and are a part of, do you love them? Do you know how to love? I spent time really learning what is real love. I wrote a book on it called Attracting Real Love. And I used to do workshops on what is real love versus false love, because we have to get really clear what love really is like at this level and how to really love other people with divine indifference. That's something that I talked about in the previous videos, etc. Have we failed our group? This is part of the karmic cleanup. There was ways that in my 20s and early 30s, I was much more reactionary. I was much more disruptive to a group. Most of us are, to be honest. We're disruptive in ways we don't even see, we don't even acknowledge. Can we finally see it? Can we finally acknowledge it? And more than that, can we rectify it? Not only to a group that we're serving with in a service activity, but our families, our friends. We look for our mistakes and we go out and rectify it. And I've mentioned this in previous videos here on my Group 8 videos. I think that was in the Accepting Disciple video. But one of the ways I really started to learn this, I drew from Tibetan Buddhist practice that I found from a modern day Tibetan Buddhist teacher, where they had whole rituals of how you clean up your karma with your group. It was really fascinating. And then, are you an asset to your group? In what way are you an asset to your group? Because the further we get along the path, especially in Pledge Disciple, the more we're dismantling how special we are. Each one of us is special. But can we focus more on what our true purpose is, how we can more effectively serve the group, and use that talent in a more dispassionate and impersonal way? Question 5. What is your attitude towards your master? Now that is the overall spiritual teacher who, in the Bailey model, is guiding you in a particular service activity to help make the world a better place. Now, you may or may not have a devotional relationship to that particular master. And as the beginning of every Bailey book says, in a way, it's irrelevant who the master is. It's more relevant how effective your service activity is, but it really does help to have authentic teachers and spiritual guides that inspire us, that guide us. Now, I've taken out the word DK here because I'm trying to make this a more universally inclusive model. For those that were in this particular group, serving a particular purpose to get these teachings out, you might say that your master was DK. Though I have found many quotes where it says you may have many different teachers from many different spiritual groups, and you may have to, for purposes of service, go here and go there type of thing. But each and every one of us has somebody that acts as a guide to inspire us. Now, if we're not as devotionally inclined, we may not feel particular devotion to that person. We may not have to put their picture up on an altar somewhere, but we still have them in our minds. Do you have somebody in your mind who is your particular inspiration? I actually have a few. Who are they? And what is your attitude towards that person? Is it just devotion without action? Is your devotion getting in the way of moving farther in the spiritual path? Let's continue to read the quote and see what it actually says here. What is your attitude towards your master? Can you sense your master's, that's in brackets, that's my addition. Can you sense my vibration at any time? How do you know the difference between your master's vibration, that of your soul or your group? This is a really important question. And that's something that has gone into in different books here at the end of one of the Dyna books, in Telepathy in the Etheric Vehicle, in Esoteric Psychology Volume 2 at the back where they talk about channeling. I'm going to do a video on that. But we have to start discerning these different levels here. And chances are, unless you're a pledged disciple, which is moving into the plane of the solar angel where the soul exists, and the soul is your first master. I've found those quotes in the Bailey books. Sometimes when it talks about your master, it's talking about your own soul. But here it says, the master's vibration, your soul, and your group. Can we discern what's what? That's going to require knowledge, understanding, viveka, discernment, to really get clear on it. And you also have to look at how effective are you in the world. If you're not very effective in the world, do you really think that a very high spiritual being is going to pay attention to you? They're going to be paying attention to the leaders of the world who may know nothing about the Bailey teachings. And that is said in the Bailey quotes as well, that oftentimes the most effective people that the, quote, masters are paying attention to aren't in esoteric groups at all, because a lot of people in esoteric groups are just putting themselves on a really high pedestal and aren't doing much in the outer world in the way of service. Back to the quote. What effect has the work of the full moon had upon you? Have there been any results of that attempted contact? And if so, what are they? The full moons became important in the Bailey tradition, so the idea of gathering at a full moon was existent way beyond that time, and they're not worshiping the full moon. It's the time when we can receive more light from the sun because the light of the moon is no longer interfering between the earth and the sun during that temporary period. Now in indigenous cultures, etc., it acted as a time clock. Everybody could see when the moon was full and they would come gather in a certain location, but the Bailey books aren't using full moon that way. And we're not going to get into that here. I have a whole series on the Soul to Spirit channel on the various full moons. What should now govern your efforts in relation to your work as my disciple or the disciple of your master? That's always in brackets. It's me adding that during the coming remainder of your life. So in general, the time of a full moon is a time every month to reflect on how am I doing spiritually? Where do I need to tweak certain things? How is my service activity going? How effective is that service activity going? And in the Bailey model, each one of those full moons has a particular theme to it to help you see if you're coming out of the level of personality or the level of soul in any particular full moon. So it's more like a clock reminder to kind of look at how am I doing on the path in regards to different themes that are being studied at the time of each of the full moons. Let's go on to the final question. The effectiveness of your service activity. Question 6. Back to the quote. What part in my plans and in the tasks assigned to my ashram are you prepared to take? This question concerns both your outer and inner work of a practical nature. A. Have you any definite schedule of work outlined in your mind as your contribution to the activity of my ashram? B. If so, what is it, and how do you propose to implement it and make it effective? C. What is the main task of the ashram at this time? Do you know the type of assistance, subjective or objective, or both, that you could give? This last question goes deeply into your ability to react to impression from me and from the ashram. I would have you answer it to the best of your ability from that angle. Okay, so specifically to the Bailey group of people, these people were not only trying to understand these teachings and get these teachings out, and anybody trying to do that, you could say, is working in, Alice Bailey called him the Tibetan's ashram. Now, I have a post about who is Alice Bailey's Tibetan on the soul2spirit.com website if you want to see my discussion of that there. But anybody working on that is working, you could say, on Alice Bailey's teachings, and you could say the Tibetan's ashram. What is an ashram? It's a group of people attempting to accomplish something spiritually in the world. Now, to let you know, Alice Bailey's group was also working hard to help with the League of Nations and later the United Nations. They had actually a lot of impact in the world, and many of them were highly influential people. And the point I'm bringing up here is that it wasn't just getting the teachings out, it was also trying to get some of the ideals out that these teachings stand for and to help bring the world together in a more unified way, but not where it was one big mush of everybody having the same kind of shopping centers and the same kind of culture, etc. It was unity in diversity. It was unanimous in certain ideals with many different ways of expressing it. It wasn't uniformity, conforming to one way of being. The Bailey teachings were opposed to that, you could say. They weren't trying to get everybody to be the same. They were trying to get everybody to hold similar ideals and respect the differences that people had. So, if we want to broaden it out beyond just simply the Bailey books, read these questions in terms of whatever spiritual community you're involved with. You could be involved in the integral community. And how are you helping that particular model go out in the world? What is your schedule of work outlined in your mind that contributes to the activity of that ashram? You could be in the scientific community. You could be in an educational community. You could be in a philosophical community. You could be in a university. What is your schedule of work? Is it definite? Is it outlined? What are you contributing to further the spiritual goals of whatever group you're involved with? And how do you propose to actually become effective? These weren't supposed to be just a bunch of ideas hanging out in the clouds, and some of us became super intellectual by studying them and super impressive primarily in our own minds or in the minds of just a few people. These were supposed to help create effective, practical change in the outer world. And what is your main task at this time? And what are you doing subjectively and objectively? And that is what these questions are about. So, as always, I go way too long. This series continues. Those were the credits. If you want to support this work, please become a patron. You get many perks if you do. Visit the Soul to Spirit website. In terms of this channel, subscribe, like, comment, share, hit the bell for alerts. And most of all, thanks for watching.